Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have our DraftKings Major League Baseball slate that starts at 7 p.m. Now, I'm just going to note here that most of the really good games are in the early part of the day, so this is a little bit annoying of a late slate that's just not very good when it comes to the quality players and stuff like that available in these particular games. With that said, we obviously gonna have to break this down. So the teams that I'm looking at stacking potential are the Angels, the Dodgers, and then maybe the Mets, and or maybe even Texas a little bit. Overall, it's a really kind of tough slate. Not going to be too easy to find a lot of good value here, and obviously pitching is going to be an issue as well. I think down the stretch of the rest of the regular season, it's going to be tough for pitching anyway because some guys are going to not go deep and stuff, trying to save arms for playoffs and things like that. So there's a lot to worry about from that perspective. But I do have some pitchers that you can use. So let's go and get into those. Before I do that, though, can you guys hit that subscribe button and like this video? That would really help out a lot. Really do appreciate it. So let's get at Max Scherzer here. Now, he is obviously facing the Braves, who had a good game yesterday against another good pitcher. But he's averaging 31. He had 31 fantasy points a game this season against the Braves in 3 games, 22, 39, and 33. And in each of those games, he had 8, 11, and 9 strikeouts. I don't know that he's super safe because he, even though this game is super important for both teams, and I do suspect him to go deep, I feel like Atlanta's playing really well lately, so it's kind of a dangerous situation for him. And then for the next guy to look at is Dylan Case. Now he's going up against San Diego. His floor is higher than some of the other options on this slate. He's not super ideal. He's a little bit better on FanDuel than on DraftKings, to be honest. And he's been kind of boomer bust lately, so you do have to be a little bit careful with him. But obviously, we do need 2 pitchers on DraftKings. So one of the top options here is Christian Javier for Houston against Tampa Bay. Now, in one game against Tampa Bay, he had 24.3 and he had 6 strikeouts, which isn't ideal, but he's still pretty good. And in 7 of the last 8 games, he's had at least 19 fantasy points, including a few 25 plus. And he's probably the best option when it comes to the DraftKings situation. He's the safest play on this particular board. Then 2 other guys to take a look at that are a little bit cheaper that you could kind of take a Hail Mary approach to. Jordan Montgomery, he's been fairly decent since he came over to St. Louis from the Yankees. And he's facing a really bad team that really doesn't have much upside in this matchup. Now, he does have some risk involved because he doesn't typically get too deep in the game, and his floor is pretty low. But he, if he could get 20 fantasy points, we'll be pretty happy with him. And then you can kind of say a similar thing with Luis Ortiz for Pittsburgh against St. Louis. In fact, he's actually pitched in 3 games so far this season, and he's done fairly well. Only 2 earned runs in those 3 games. Now, the only issue he's really got is he doesn't go very deep. He's only gone about 4 or 5 innings in those 3 games. But one of those games is against the Yankees, which is actually, to go 5 innings against the Yankees, the way they're set up right now, and only give up 1 earned run is pretty decent. Only 3 hits, too, and had 5 strikeouts. Overall, I think he's in a pretty good spot here. Obviously not the most ideal situation, but if you're just desperate to save money, you could do a lot worse than him on this slate. Let's go ahead and get into the batters, though. At catcher, we really just have a couple good options, either Will Smith or Austin Barnes, which I kind of expect both of them to play. I'll probably throw Austin Barnes in my lineup if he ends up being the guy. There's just not a lot that's in a good position in this game. But if you want to, go with Contreras or d'Arnaud for a late game home run, then that's definitely viable in this situation. But honestly, there's just a lot of the few guys that I tend to like to take a look at on a slate like this are going up against the best pitchers, so it's just not an ideal situation for catchers. At first base, though, we have some good options. First, we're going to take a look at Dan Vogel Bach for the New York Mets against Atlanta. Now, Wright's a pretty good pitcher, but he has been hitting the ball decent enough that he is somebody that's in play here, and he has been pretty good against Wright in his career. Nathaniel Lowe is a guy I like here against Suarez for the Angels. He's averaging 7.3 points a game against the Angels, and he's had a couple really good games lately, and he's starting to come back, his batting average back up from the last 10. Then we're going to look at Matt Olson. Now, he's going to just coming out of a slump, but he's averaging 8.1 fantasy points against the Mets. This is a tough matchup for him, obviously, against Scherzer, but I think he's still a decent option, if not but in the late part of the game whenever they go to the bullpen. And then Pete Alonso for the Mets, he's actually just been incredible lately, 15.7 fantasy points a game. He's only had a couple bad games lately, so I really like him in this matchup, even though it's not super ideal. And then Freddie Freeman against the Colorado Rockies. I really like the Dodgers in this matchup. Now, obviously, they're pretty expensive over here on DraftKings. They're a little bit easier to roster, a bunch of Dodgers on FanDuel, but they're still viable over here, and so he is somebody to take a look at. At second base, we have Colton Wong for Milwaukee. He's been hitting the ball 8.9 fantasy points the last 10, and he's been solid against Miami this season. In 3 games, he's got 18 fantasy points a game, so I really like him in this situation. Then we're going to look at Simeon for Texas. He's another guy I like pretty good here. He's averaging 10 fantasy points a game and hitting over 300, and he has home run potential in this matchup. Then if you want to look at a LA Angels stack, here's one guy you're going to take a look at is Luis Rengifo. He's been hitting the ball really well lately, averaging 6 fantasy points a game, and he's been pretty decent against Texas too, averaging 7. And he had some really big games the last few days, and he's home run threat as the season's winding down. Jeff McNeil is another guy I like here for the Mets. He's been really solid against right in his career, and he's hitting 333, 7.7 last 10. Then if we look at third base, Josh Jung for the Texas Rangers is in a good spot, averaging 8.7 fantasy points the last 10, though he is extremely boomer bust right now. Max Muncy, who is a good option here for the Dodgers, he's averaging 7 fantasy points a game last 10, and he's kind of been boomer bust lately, but I still think he has some upside here. And obviously we're in Gifo again. There's really not a lot at third base that I love on this particular situation. You could look at Austin Riley or Manny Machado, but they have really tough matchups. Then we're going to look at shortstop, and Corey Seager is my top option there, and his price is pretty fair for his potential production here. Averaging 10 fantasy points a game against the Angels this season is very nice. Trey Turner has not been good lately, but he is somebody to mention based on who they're playing, and he's been good against Colorado on the season, and Freeland especially. And then Lindor for the Mets has absolutely been crushing the ball lately. He's averaging 10.4 and a 364 batting average. Obviously, he's a little bit boomer bust, but he's been good against right in his career as well. And then another guy that I think will be underlooked at, but could be really solid today and hit a home run is Willie Adames. He's been hitting the ball extremely good, except for the last couple games, but he's averaging 8.2 the last 10, and he has a good matchup here in this situation against Miami. In the outfield, we have Trace Thompson for the Dodgers against Freeland. I really like him in this particular matchup, even though he hadn't been hitting the ball from the batting average perspective. He's averaging 7 fantasy points a game. Obviously, he needs a home run in order to pay off here, but he's been playing pretty well. Tyler Naquin for the Mets is in a good spot here against Atlanta. He hadn't hit the ball well lately either, but he's been good against right in his career. Nemo is probably one of my favorite plays on the Mets. He's been solid at hitting 343 for the last 10 games, and I think he has potential to have a really solid game here in this one. And then Taylor Ward is probably my favorite play on the Angels, not named Trout, simply because he's averaging almost 14 fantasy points a game, hitting .417 over the last 10 games, and he's just a home run machine right now. Jeff McNeil is another guy I really like in this particular matchup. He's averaging 7.7 fantasy points a game. And then Trout and Ohtani, obviously, are great options. He's averaging quite a few. Trout is a better option, obviously, averaging 9 fantasy points a game, and he's a home run right here. And then Adolis Garcia for Texas. He has a really good matchup here, and he's hit the ball extremely well against the Angels pitcher, and so I really like him. Suarez against Suarez here. So with that said, I think we have a really solid slate. It's going to be a little bit rough because it's just not the most ideal slate. A lot of the better teams and the guys that look really good today are in the early slates. So unfortunately, that kind of sucks for the main slate. But overall, you can definitely build some good lineups here. And so, if you can get the pitching right, then you'll probably have a pretty good day. So thank you guys for liking, commenting, and subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. And have a nice day, guys.